Hi, I'm Catherine Llewellyn, the host of the podcast. You can find out all about Truth and Transcendence on truthandtranscendence.com. And you can find out all about me on beingspace.world, where you will find my online coaching offering as well as my UK-based workshops. The Freedom of Spirit workshop for liberation and empowerment, the Pellower Radical Shift in Consciousness workshop for spiritual expansion, and transformational coaching for exploring the mind-body-spirit connection on the expansive path. You can also support the podcast by actually making a donation. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all our episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. So today I'm delighted to welcome special guest Jeremy Van Wert, or Wert. Jeremy, I forgot to check with you the pronunciation of your surname.
Oh, no, the American pronunciation of it is Jeremy Van Wert.
Excellent. Thank you. Jeremy Van Wert, who's here today to talk about sensitivity. Jeremy is a coach and thought leader, a licensed marriage and family therapist, a psychedelic therapist, a healer, and host of the Mindful Mutiny podcast. He's also author of There Is More, Living a Life of Expansiveness in a World That Is Not Perfect. And you can find Jeremy on mindfulmutiny.com. So, Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on the show.
I'm super excited to have a conversation with you today.
Thank you. So, we spoke last time about sensitivity and how that's been a really central theme for you in your life. So, could I ask you to kind of go right back to the beginning, and can you remember the first time that you realized that sensitivity was really important to you?
Really important to me is different than recognizing that the sensitivity is something that I just can't seem to get away from. And the way that I would kind of discuss that is that I grew up with ADHD, and it's a really difficult thing, particularly in the early 1980s when I was growing up and there was not a lot of awareness in the educational system of what it really was. It was just really naughty boys who need pills. And so I started taking the naughty boy pills, and I came to a point where I would get really, really upset with myself because I would continually do things and then get rejected by my peers, do things and get rejected by my teachers, do things and get rejected by a system. And I would try to act better and it wouldn't work out. And then I'd end up in the principal's office again. And this happened year after year. And I had one teacher who I write about in my book, and her name was Eleanor Lindquist. And she was there through grammar school, and she recognized the strengths that I had. And she would sit individually with me and do individual tutoring. It was really, really great for me. And as I grew into kind of my middle school and high school years, that sensitivity is something that I had to cover over through class clowning, being funny, being energetic, being a musician, because that sensitivity was something that whenever I showed it, I always felt violated. I always get my feelings hurt. I'd always end up coming out angry because I felt taken advantage of. And so it wasn't really until much later in my life that sensitivity is something that I began to embrace as a real benefit and not a liability and something that was constantly getting me hurt. You know, and in particular for me, the sensitivity has allowed me to dive deeply into my own journey, my own spiritual journey, and to create a greater sense of empathy for others. And of course, this is where the whole psychedelic journeys have come in. And this sensitivity has allowed me to dive very deeply into the medicine and to change my life in a way where I can use that sensitivity and that empathy to help people instead of have it be what felt like a great liability to me as a little boy because my feelings were always getting hurt and I always felt alone.
Ah, right. Okay. So many questions. So when you were a little boy, what sort of things were you doing that was gaining the disapproval of the people around you?
I was just very, very intense. And I was always very fidgety, very, very wiggly, very distracted. And when all the other kids were doing pleasure reading or doing math, I couldn't focus on it and I would just make noise, sometimes to intentionally annoy the others. I would do things that were attention seeking. I was really, really good at Michael Jackson's moonwalk. And so I would go to sharpen my pencil and do the moonwalk the whole way there, the moonwalk the whole way back to my desk, and end up getting sent out into the hallway because it wasn't moonwalk time, it was math time. And so these, second grade, third grade, fourth grade kind of things that I would end up doing. It was just mainly just hijinks that was distracting and would kind of single me out in the classroom because I was just being silly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Were you bored?
Yes,
Yeah,
tremendously bored.
yeah,
And it really took a teacher's individual and unique attention on me to help me be able to focus well enough to do my work.
yeah.
And in that space, I wasn't being rejected. In that space, it was safe to focus in with a person because I could speak to her the way that I'm speaking to you, and I could focus in on something. But in a classroom full of 30 kids, it was just beyond me.
Mm. Well, that's, because I listened to that, I think, it sounds like your response to the situation was probably quite authentic, as in it probably was boring. And probably trying to break that in some way was probably an authentic response, whereas everyone else's response was probably less authentic. I mean, I speak as somebody who I was often bored at school and also resentful for being stuck there. I didn't think it was really wise. And I annoyed my teachers as well. And looking back, I now think that that was perfectly reasonable behavior. But at the time, it wasn't considered reasonable behavior.
Right.
And I think there's also that thing of if someone's being naughty, people assume that that person doesn't have feelings.
That's true. That's true. That is quite how it was.
Yeah.
And the person with ADHD ends up getting wounded over and over. It's like those wounds just pile on top of one another. And so you get really sensitive to criticism, really sensitive to rejection, even later in life. And so you kind of are listening for the rejection and you immediately disengage. It's a really common thing for somebody with ADHD to do. And so for me to be able to then like embrace sensitivity as something that is a good thing for me, something that is good in my world. It's one of the things that I help my clients be able to embrace in themselves. Sometimes people don't recognize their own sensitivity and the way in which that they have allowed for that sensitivity to be something that hurts them because somebody can relate to when I get vulnerable, that's when I get hurt. When I get real with people, that's when I put myself out there. If I get rejected, it's just so bad. So I don't put myself out there. And so, number one, to recognize that's what you're doing. So a lot of people don't necessarily recognize that that's the pattern that they are doing. They're not being vulnerable because they're afraid of their own sensitivity. That if they are sensitive, that they're going to put themselves up to be hurt once again. And people don't want that. That's not a fun thing to do, particularly if that's been a real source of hurt all your life. And so vulnerability can be a tremendous strength, and it can be really, really difficult to do, to be vulnerable versus performative, to be authentic versus overly professional in a space, to be authentically yourself. When you recognize, number one, how to create a situation where you're safe being that way, when and where it's safe to be that way, how to surround yourself by people that it's safe being vulnerable and sensitive around, instead of surrounding yourself by people who continually violate your sensitivity. That's also an important part of just personal growth. And as I work with people in their lives, on their professional journey, on their personal journey, spiritual journey, and physical health journey, increasing one's being surrounded by great people, being surrounded by people that it's completely okay to be sensitive with. That is really definitely a goal in itself.
Absolutely. And so much of what you were saying, I can see elements of in most people, actually, that where someone opens up and shares, perhaps from a place of feeling a little bit fragile, maybe, and if it's not well received, it's almost like they're being punished for being sensitive, which is a really unfortunate pattern to lay down, isn't it? Particularly for children.
Yes.
So you obviously made a significant transition, and you sort of, as an aside, you said this is where the psychedelics come in. As you were talking about starting to value your own sensitivity and seeing it as an asset, really. So what was the thing that started you along the path of making the shift from I'm being punished for my sensitivity, I'm being hurt, therefore I must act out and entertain everybody to survive, etc. And then obviously at some point something must have started to shift. Can you remember when that was?
I had my first psychedelic medicine journey in my mid 30s. And it was the very first time that I had ever done a medicine of that nature. And it opened me up to what was, number one, a much greater focus, a much better ability to be able to be mindful and to meditate in my life. It opened me up to many more realities than the one that I was living, because as somebody who is neurodivergent, I had stuck to, I love routines. I love sticking to something. It creates incredible efficiency in my life. I can get a lot of things done. And introducing something that pulled me away from just a routine and demonstrated so much more of my potential, it helped me be able to access more of understanding what sensitivity, empathy, and expansiveness could do in my own life. And I had much more of a corporate journey left in me to do. And it took me quite a long time of, being quite successful in a corporate world. I worked myself from being a lobby security officer to being a CEO of a company. And that was sheerly with brains and routine that I accomplished that.
Hey,
And you certainly can't be in that C-suite and be sensitive. It is not a place for sensitivity. It is a place for savages. in many cases, I mean, you have to watch your back inside the office and outside the office, and it's not a place for true authenticity. And that's unfortunately one of the problems that our civilization has. But what I ended up doing was recognizing that overcompensating for me to become successful was workaholism. Pushing myself into 80-hour work weeks, sleeping at the headquarters, and so that I could wake up, take a shower, and get at my desk within a few minutes. And then, being at that desk until, dark, and then I'd walk to the bus that was parked in the back of the parking lot, and then I'd sleep there. I was overbalancing this lack of humanity in myself to get the job done. And so now that I am really working individually with people who are high achievers, I'm helping those people be able to balance their personal life, their spiritual life with that professional life. Because I mean, we all definitely want to be a success. We have to define what success means to us. We have to define what our lives are about. We have to define what our talents are, what's good for us, and couple that with where we really, really want to go. So this journey that I started in my mid-30s that kind of started awakening me to there is more than just the 2-week paycheck was something that culminated where I had to see it in my life as well as in this plant medicine space, that sensitivity is an asset. And when you have to suspend your sensitivity, your vulnerability, for the sake of your personal, your professional life, you really are limiting your own potential. And you're not going to be happy. You're not going to be fulfilled. You're not going to be making real friends. You're going to be making people who want access to your space in the world, access to your power, proximity to your power. They're not going to be people who are there because they care about you. And, that in itself was a big lesson in my life. I had a hard time making friends when I was in grammar school. Then, as an adult, I had a position where everybody wanted to be around me because they wanted to be close to those levers of power. So I had a bunch of fake friends. And so to rebalance your life so that you're not around a bunch of fake corporate friends, you're around people who actually want you to transcend, who enjoy your vulnerability, who care for you, who laugh with you. That is how you actually discipline your life to live the greatest piece of you.
That was lovely the way you just described the kind of friends you want to have around you. Really lovely. Would you mind repeating that if you can remember? The friends who, they want you to transcend, they enjoy your vulnerability, they care about you. And what was the fourth one?
They laugh with you.
They laugh with you. Yeah.
With you. Yes.
I thought, wow, that's a great menu right there for what you want in a friend. And it strikes me that you probably couldn't have come up with something like that if you hadn't explored the downsides of being sensitive as well as the upside.
Yeah. Yeah. And everybody has experienced some version of trauma, some more dark than others. And that trauma, particularly if it's a relationship trauma or it involves SA, these kinds of things, then sensitivity can feel extremely dangerous. It can feel, or because of experiences early in your life with bad people, you can seek bad people in your life because those patterns are kind of ingrained. So learning what are the kinds of people that you need to seek? What are the kinds of friends that you actually need to have around you? Who is actually good for you and who pulls you down? Who uses your sensitivity and your vulnerability against you to gaslight and control you?
Yeah. What a fantastic transition you made. I'm delighted that you were able to do that because that's not inevitable that somebody would do that. How did you come to discover plant medicine? How did you come across that?
It's become more written about and talked about in the last 20 years. And it was a friend who was a specialist in this who had asked me if I was interested in doing it. And I certainly didn't want to do it in, a party setting. I didn't want to do it in a place where I might feel vulnerable. And this was a person who's very well trained and knew how to take care of somebody. And so I did it with him the first time. And I had really no idea what to expect. And when I did do it in a set and setting that was wonderful, it was a beautiful experience. It was terrific. He told me what not to do. He stayed with me. He was very present. And it was really quite delightful. And really at the end of my first experience, it was like one of those life experiences where you're like, well, life can never be the same again. I know things now. I've seen things now. I know more about myself now. And I don't do them myself very often. Instead of, I do some microdosing and so here and there. I don't do it myself very often because I want to take that careful time to integrate the medicine so that I can make a discipline in my own life of incorporating the things that I have learned, because those are really important thing when you're opening up your kind of portal to the great beyond and working in the medicine to gain insights. There has to be time to put those insights into practice in your life and be held accountable.
Yeah.
And so, I work with people with medicine. I work with people not with medicine. I use the same technique. We're going to build a strategic plan for your life, and we're going to help you integrate things that you are learning into your life and, take your life to a new space. And so that, for me, has meant having my own mentor to be able to talk out. Gosh, I was seeing ravens. The ravens were everywhere, and I was flying with them, and they were leading me through this wonderful valley, and they were taking me somewhere, and it felt good, but I didn't know where. And to have that mentor who's been in the medicine for a very long period of time, yes, the ravens, they take you there. They're inviting you deeper. They're inviting you to the underworld. They are inviting you to the place of transcendence. They are taking you deeper and deeper into your journey when you're with them in the medicine. They pull you deeper. And I didn't know that, but I have an experienced person that was able to tell me what those visions were. And it's really, really quite a beautiful thing.
Yeah. That's so important, the time to integrate, isn't it? Because some people go off to a retreat somewhere and, blow their mind, have an incredible time, and come back and go, that was incredible. I have to go back and do it again as soon as possible. And sometimes those people don't actually do anything with it. But that business of actually taking the time to integrate. We used to use psychedelics back in the 70s. And for the first experience, somebody would always have a guide. In those days, there were no professional guides as such. So these were people who'd doing it for love, they practice it for love, and somebody would have a guide that first time. And then when you were more experienced, you were then called on to be a guide for somebody else. And there was a lot of attention paid to preparation and integration afterwards. It was considered very, very important. Yeah, so for listeners who know nothing about psychedelics, apart from the old, there used to be those movies in the, I can't remember when they were, but there were movies like sort of public health warning movies that would say, you can't take psychedelics because if you do, you will believe that you can fly and you will jump off a building and you will be dead. Now, I've never heard of that actually happening to anybody ever, but people listening may have whatever ideas they've got about it. So are you able to explain to listeners a little bit about how it is that psychedelics actually, what they actually do for somebody that then has a beneficial effect?
There is a wonderful book out there called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, and it's a wonderful chronicle of what has happened in the United States with psychedelics, what the ancient lineage of these medicines are, and how they came to be so deeply maligned. Now, a young lady did jump off of a building while she was taking LSD, and it was the daughter of Art Linkletter. And he became a crusader after losing his daughter, against all drugs. But the problem was that it is quite likely that she was on many different drugs at the same time, that she was on LSD, and that it is very clear that she did not have somebody with her to help her recognize what was real from what was not real. And so the inappropriate thing about this that you can just absolutely surely say is that this poor young lady did not have somebody keeping her safe with her, and she had whatever it was that was going on in her mind. Beyond a terrible tragedy of that nature, this medicine is something, and every single medicine has its own different personality.
Yes.
Mushrooms, LSD, MDMA, all of the different ones, ayahuasca, they have a different footprint and they do a different thing in you. And these medicines are non-harmful. They are not addictive. They don't break your brain. It's best to do it with people who are experienced. And it's best if you have a mental health history in your family that can be profound, that you're doing it with a person who understands what that history is and feels confident in doing it with you and has the training to do it with you. It's very, very important that the person has a great deal of experience. Okay. Now, the medicine, imagine that our lives are a freeway. Okay. And we're traveling to usually every day to a place, a destination that we know. And we get on the same freeway and we get off at the same exit ramp and we go to those places. And sometimes we go on vacation, which means that we travel a bit further on that freeway and we get off at known exit ramps. But there's an entire web of highways and byways in our mind. And what this medicine does is it helps connect all of those wonderful highways and byways. And this is what we call neuroplasticity. It is the ability to access more parts of your brain so that you can explore more of what is in you, more of what is in you ancestrally, more of what is in you psychically, more of what is in you creatively. And remember those things when you come back as if you have traveled new highways and now you know where they are. Now you know what they are. Now you know where they lead. And you could take that into your meditation life, your prayer life, and you can acknowledge, gosh, I really was this great lion in this vision. And I really want to be that lion in my life. I want to be that gentle giant that is fierce when he needs to be or when she needs to be. And so taking this wonderful new set of connections that you've made through this medicine that when I say it's non-addictive, anything that you take is something that you can overuse. People overeat and become overweight. People drink too much. That can be very addictive. This medicine does not have what is considered the chemical addiction. Okay. Somebody can go, wow, I love that space. I really want to be in that space more because I'm more comfortable there than in my real life, and then become habitually misusing the medicine. But the medicine itself doesn't create like a cocaine or a methamphetamine, some need, some withdrawal in you if you don't have it. So there's been a great deal of misinformation. The United States in the 1980s launched the war on drugs, and the Reagan family that led our country during that time, they had the Just Say No campaign. That was something that Nancy Reagan had started, and every single substance that was not prescribed to you by a doctor was seen as addictive and terrible, and it was called dope. And all of the shows on TV had to have some sort of a message to children about how drugs were bad.
I remember, yeah.
Everything was classified as the same thing. And so, cocaine was considered the same thing as marijuana. And of course, we know that that's absurd today, but that is what the message was at the time. It was really, really overblown.
Yeah. Thank you. Wonderful. I think that's the neuroplasticity thing is just so fascinating, isn't it? Because I think about the freeway. I like that metaphor. I think it's a metaphor, isn't it? I like that because you get to know the freeway and then you ignore the freeway when you're traveling on it all the time. It's true, isn't it? The psychedelics kind of suddenly you are really paying attention to everything because it's right there. You can't just ignore it and just be, well, it's the same freeway it always is. It absolutely isn't the same freeway it always is. It's something else. And that's very liberating, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. And you recognize, my gosh, I'm more expansive. I'm more creative. I'm more connected to my angels, my God, than I ever really thought I was. I'm more connected to Earth Mother than I ever actually thought I was. And this feels so warm and so beautiful. I'm going to exist here for a bit. And to be in that just sense of total okay. because in this world, there's a lot of things where we have to cover our regular selves. We have to cover ourselves in this blanket of professionalism, this blanket of having to get on in our lives. And so to be in a place that is total sensitivity, total vulnerability, total beauty, and to just exist in it, where you may find that this flower outside that you've walked past a million times has something to tell you. And you sit next to it, and this little flower sings and blows in the breeze and shows you how beautiful she is. And you just gain something so wonderful by appreciating the little folds in the petals that you never looked at when you were watering her. But she wants to show you today how beautiful she is, and she's proud, and she wants you to be proud of you. Just something like this, where you can spend what feels like, quite a very long time paying attention to something that is mundane to you in your life, but you get to explore the beauty of the mundane in a manner that increases your awareness of the beauty that you walk past every single day.
Beautiful. And I can see in that description that connection between that experience and a different relationship with sensitivity, because in there you're experiencing your sensitivity in a way that is wonderful, as opposed to experiencing it in a way which is dangerous and scary. And so it's a completely different experience of that same faculty.
Yes.
So are you now, obviously you're still a very sensitive man, which of course, if you weren't, you wouldn't be able to do the wonderful work you're doing, particularly work with families and marriages. You have to be sensitive for that, don't you?
Yes, you absolutely do. And you can really speak into people's lives when they recognize it coming from a place of love, respect, and sensitivity, and humility. You can really speak deeply into a marriage when you're coming from that space, because there's often a lot of hurt that's going on by the time that the couple comes to do marriage therapy. And you can really speak into somebody's life who has struggled with their own sensitivities because they've worked so hard to try to cover those things over. And I know a lot of people that I work with in my coaching who are, they're high-level people, doctors and lawyers and people who are executives. And in order to fuel their lives, they get up and they start slamming coffee in the morning. And I love coffee in the morning. But when you have to drink 3 cups in the morning, 3 cups in the afternoon, and you continually just so that you can have the energy to get to the end of the day. And then when you go home, you can't relax because you're just humming. And so what you do to relax is you drink and you start pulling yourself down, and so that you can finally get yourself to bed. Or you're drinking coffee because you got to pull an all-nighter because you've got so much done, so much to do by Friday that you got to pull an all-nighter or 2. And you start burning out your adrenals. And there's no job in the world that's worth that when you're burning yourself out. There's a problem with your company if it's demanding that out of you. And so, number one, recognizing the manner in which you're injuring yourself, your psyche, and your physical body to do this job. Number 2, what has made you feel like this is the only way for you to live? Number 3, how has it alienated your relationship with your friends and your family? And then number 4, are you actually willing to change this, or are you pretending that you're happy? Because if you're going to pretend that this makes you happy and you know deep down that it doesn't, then come back when you're ready to actually make a change in your life where you start prioritizing yourself over these other people who are not ever going to actually prioritize you. It's your family, it's your friends, if they are good ones, that will always prioritize you.
Strong words. Very good. Yeah. So, yes, and sometimes people are stuck in that. I mean, at one time in my life, I was the 6 cups of coffee a day person. And it was actually very funny. The day I realized that I should give up coffee, And someone recommended me to a really wonderful nutritionist, and she introduced me to a herbal tea to drink instead. And I stopped coffee. And the way I discovered how toxic that had been was because I was on the board of the company. I was sitting in a board meeting, and we used to have board meetings that were really brutal.
Yep.
Someone was always slicing somebody apart.
Yep.
Normally, everyone was in a state of hyper alertness throughout the board meeting in case they were the ones who were going to get it next, right? And I was in my sort of detox from my coffee to the point where I was alternating between being hyper irritable and completely zombie. There ain't nothing going on here. And in this meeting, I was just completely zombie. Someone was slammed into me and I was like, yeah, whatever. And after that, I thought, my God, what have I been doing to myself with this coffee? Because I realized I'd completely disconnected myself from my own real presence. And that was just one example. And you described something that's full of many different aspects of that.
And I want to speak to what you just talked about, because the path to the executive suite for a lot of people is got to do a lot of board time. You got to do a lot of some volunteering. You've got to be friends with the right people, be at the right spaces. You've got to be very guarded. And then you get yourself in there and you're guarding your space in that. Those spaces can be tremendously toxic. And what you just talked about was whatever board that was completely dysfunctional. And a lot of people who are on boards, they're not studying what it takes to be a functional board. And when they do, and they look at the board that they're on and they go, my God, like I got to do 3 years of this. I got to be on this thing for 3 years. And these boards can often be so tremendously dysfunctional. And I had a dysfunctional board when I was a CEO. And they've been prone to secrecy, prone to secret meetings, prone to reactionary actions, and so forth. And that's all just kindergarten board stuff.
Yeah.
That boards shouldn't be engaging in that kind of behavior. But they do. And it's tremendously stressful because it's exactly what you talk about, where you realize you got to keep some sort of low profile because you don't know when the guns are going to be aimed at you, and you got to know things about other people so that you can press back on them because of some shenanigan that they're up to. That's an awful way to craft a career. It really is tough on people. And the people who excel at that are the people who lack sensitivity.
Yeah.
And so generally at the top of those structures, you have people who are paranoid, who lack sensitivity, and who are willing to just do damage to people in order to keep themselves on top. And that is a space where the person has to ask, okay, what are my life goals? What do I really want out of life? Am I actually doing any good here? Or is this just a space that I come because I really need something on my resume, and there's plenty of boards to join that aren't toxic versus the ones that are just spinning around and creating drama?
Yeah, totally. And of course, if you're completely stressed out and exhausted, then if someone says, right, we're going to do a project now to improve the functionality of the board, you're like, I have no energy for that. I just can't do it. I'm exhausted. So you're right. I do think a lot of organizations now are doing work to change this. Are you working with organizations as well as individuals?
I do work with organizations, and I can say not enough of these organizations are doing that. Not enough of these organizations and businesses have awareness of how dysfunctional they are, or they know they're dysfunctional and they don't care. And so to do the work conscientiously of making a change in your organization, it really does take, number one, everybody admitting on the surface that there's a problem, and that's an easy thing to do, but actually wanting to involve themselves in a process of making some positive changes. And sometimes there can be a very superficial effort at change, and you find out when it comes time to make a real decision as to whether or not anything is actually really sinking in. And so, yeah, the working with organizations can be incredibly rewarding if you can help that culture change and make it stick. The thing is, it takes a lot of years to make that happen.
Yeah. Good. Well, I'm glad you're still doing that, because I think your particular energy and approach could be really refreshing to some of these organizations, because often there's a person sitting on the top, isn't there, who's looking at their board and going, I don't know what to do with this lot. I don't know what, it's hard for them to see what they may have contributed to how things are, or what they might do differently to kind of shift things. And I think for people like that, talking to someone like you outside of the organization can be an absolute godsend.
Yes. Yeah, it really can. It's an ugly space when a CEO has to cycle through different board presidents year after year after year, because it's a different relationship. It's a different, this person's easy on you. This person is vindictive. This person's hard on you. This person, and you as a leader, you're the same person. You're trying to take this organization in a specific space, and you're having to relearn a new person each year. That's a really difficult thing. And so, once again, your space where you occupy, your space where you live, your own sensitivity, your own dreams, your own what makes you healthy. When we're young, we have coaches for volleyball and for football and for marching band and so forth. And then at a certain point in our life, when we're long past university, we've been flying alone for a really long period of time without somebody to stand next to you, encourage you, love on you a little bit, show you how brilliant you are. And you've been in your work setting for a really long period of time, and you've learned how maybe to meld with that work setting. But is it taking you to the space that you want to occupy in this world? If you're in the middle of your career going, I don't exactly know. I know what I've done. I know where I wanted to be when I was in my 30s, but now I'm not sure where I'm going, and I want to craft that. And I'm not sure that where I wanted to be in my 30s is where I really want to end up. And things are starting to feel dry. They're starting to feel not fun, not engaging. It's become much more of a pattern in my life. To have a coach who's been there and done that and can really sit next to you and help you recognize that the things that you've been trying to cover, like for me, sensitivity, are actually a wonderful strength for you. This sensitivity has allowed me to develop my senses, where I have this ability where I can see people's pain, and I can feel it myself, and I can identify where it often is in somebody's body and what it feels like. And oftentimes people will say, yeah, it does feel like that. It feels like insects are in me, and it feels like I just want to, it feels like they're crawling around in me. That's what it feels like. If you can name that sort of thing, and I couldn't do that if I didn't really tap deeply into my own sensitivity with people, then you can help people breathe their way out of it, work their way through it to the point where those insects are gone, or that dark smoke or oil or soot is gone, and they can breathe themselves and strategize themselves into being in a space where they enjoy what they're doing every single day. Takes some work, takes some demolition, but it also results in just living a better life.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine that must be so rewarding for your clients. So let's remind people where they can find you, which is mindfulmutiny.com. And are you happy for people just to contact you randomly and ask questions or have a chat with you or whatever?
Absolutely. There is a space on the website to have a 15-minute conversation with me for free. I'd love to chat with anybody out there about what you're dealing with and how you want to strategize your life, and what I might be able to do to help you.
Fantastic. And of course, people can tune into your podcast, Mindful Mutiny and hear more of you and of your guests as well. And they can read your book, which, just to remind us, is called There Is More: Living a Life of Expansiveness in a World That Is Not Perfect. Fantastic. Amazing work you're doing, Jeremy. Seriously. So
Thank you so much.
it's my pleasure. So we've been talking about, we've covered an awful lot today, actually. And I could happily talk to you for hours. I really could. But for you today, has there been a favorite part of our conversation?
You know, I've loved talking about the role of sensitivity in developing your higher self, and how we talked a great deal about psychedelics and how that can really open up some deep, loving spaces. And I always enjoy talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That was great. I love the way you described that. I think it's wonderful. And so, final thing I like to ask my guests is there a reflection question that you would like to leave for our listeners, for them to take away and reflect on across the week, that would help them connect with some of what we've been talking about today?
Yes, and it's going to sound like it's not related. And the question is, in what way in your life do you need to take out the trash? And that means, in what way do you tow with you things that aren't helping you? Take out the trash of your emotions. In what way are people around you dragging you down? What take out the trash do you need to do in the relationships around you? And in what way is the spaces in which you work not working for you? In what way is it not organized? In what way is it not helping you focus? Take out the trash in your workspace and organize your space. Take out the trash in your life and remove things that aren't helping you. And so that you're not being held down, drugged backward, or in any way inhibited in being the greatest that you can be.
Wonderful. I absolutely love it. Thank you, Jeremy, so much.
You're welcome.
So that's all for Truth and Transcendence today. You can find our other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, and share with your friends, and comment on what we were discussing today. And have a great week and take care. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. It really helps if you give a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, a review, and share with your friends. If you're looking for transformational coaching or an intensive transformational weekend workshop experience, I can help with that. You can actually help the show by making a donation. Until next time, take care.